Hey everyone, welcome back to Inside Thailand. Today's story comes from a man named Alan, a 58-year-old philosophy professor from Oregon who came to Thailand looking for peace after a messy divorce, and instead found himself entangled in something far more complicated. He thought he'd found love with a woman named Nicha, a younger, confident Thai woman who challenged him intellectually and made him feel alive again. But behind her charm were red flags he didn't want to see. And then he met her sister. What happens next is something Alan admits he never expected, and he's not proud of how it unfolded. It's a story about betrayal, family, and the quiet, messy way we sometimes find redemption in the very last place we should. It's dramatic, it's uncomfortable, but it's honest. So here's his story, in his own words. Hey man, I wasn't planning to write in. I've watched your channel for a while now, always with a faint sense of superiority. I'll admit, that'll never be me, I used to mutter. Poor devils. A bit smug maybe. The old academic ego refusing to believe I could be undone by something as elemental as love. But here I am, sitting on a shaded veranda in Udon Thani, listening to the birds argue in the mango trees, my wife humming softly as she boils tamarind for some homeopathic remedy I don't pretend to understand. And yet, despite the serenity, I find myself haunted by the memory of her sister's voice, sharp, musical, and laced with just enough cruelty to still make me wince. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, I've been both the fool and the villain in my own story. And like any good philosopher, I thought understanding the nature of love would protect me from its consequences. It didn't. But before I take you into the madness, before I confess what I did, what she did, and how I ended up marrying the sister of the woman I betrayed, let me just offer this. There are no clean endings, only the messes we choose to live with. I met Nicha in 2015. I was 48, freshly divorced, tenured at the University of Oregon, and suffering from what I'd call a slow-motion existential hemorrhage. You know the type. Sartre called it nausea. In my case, it felt more like academic decay. I needed distance from my colleagues, my ex-wife, my nameplate on the office door that read department chair, but might as well have read here lies Alan. So I took a sabbatical, booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok under the auspices of cross-cultural research, and landed with a suitcase full of linen shirts and unread books on Theravada Buddhism. I didn't know it then, but I was about to burn down my own life in the most elegant, slow-cooked disaster you could imagine. Now, if you're expecting a bar girl story, you'll be disappointed. This isn't Soy Cowboy or Walking Street. I met Nicha at a conference. Yes, a conference. A hospitality and tourism symposium of all things. I'd been invited to give a keynote on the ethics of sustainable development. Ironic, considering what came next. Nicha was 30, confident, bilingual, and devastating in that understated Thai way. Precise eye contact, deliberate speech, and a smile that seemed to know something about you you'd rather keep hidden. She worked in hotel management, wore smart slacks and subtle lipstick, and had the kind of intelligence that made me think I was speaking to a colleague, not a stranger. She asked me if I believed in karma. I said I believed in accountability. She laughed and said, "Same thing, but your version is slower." I should have known then. Anyway, fast forward a few years, and I'm no longer in Bangkok. I'm here in Udon Thani, married to her sister Dao. And yes, it's real. It's peaceful. It's good. But don't mistake that for a fairy tale ending. The story I'm about to tell isn't about happily ever after. It's about what happens when you mistake complexity for virtue. When you believe someone is different simply because they're clever enough to pretend they are. When you cheat. and then justify it, and when somehow the universe hands you not punishment, but a second chance, at someone else's expense, I'll tell you everything, but fair warning, it won't make me look good. Nicha and I didn't fall into anything overnight. That's part of what made it all feel so credible. We started with coffee, which turned into late lunches, then slow, meandering walks through Lumpini Park, where she would quiz me about Western literature, and I, like a buffoon in corduroy armour, interpreted her curiosity as intellectual compatibility. She asked me once, "Why don't people in your country believe in ghosts anymore?" I said, "We traded ghosts for therapy." She laughed until tears welled up in her eyes. You have to understand, I wasn't lonely in the traditional sense. I was exhausted, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. My divorce had been sterile, devoid of drama, but not of bitterness. Two people who'd simply stopped speaking the same language, legally dissolving their apathy. Nicha, in contrast, made me feel like I was being read again, page by page, like I mattered. And for a man who's spent his life being a footnote in other people's lectures, that feeling is intoxicating. She told me about her life growing up in Isan, about how she and her older sister Dao had raised chickens in the backyard and studied by candlelight when the power cut out during the rainy season. Her father had died young, her mother worked at a local clinic, and Dao, she said, was the good one. Too good, in fact. She never lies, but she also never dreams. Nicha once whispered to me in bed. Yes, we got there, eventually. But back then, I told myself it was a relationship built on mutual respect. Two adults finding common ground in a strange space. I didn't see the signs because I didn't want to. Or maybe I saw them and excused them the way clever people often do, by framing red flags as cultural differences. Her little deceptions started small, a missed appointment here, a strange excuse there. I once spotted a WhatsApp message pop up from someone named Tun. When I asked who that was, she said flatly, "My cousin." No smile, no follow-up, just the word, like a closed door. I believed her. God help me, I wanted to. When I suggested we move north for a while, somewhere quieter, less crowded than Bangkok, she was surprisingly eager, said it'd be good to be near family again. Her mother wasn't well, she added, and Dao had been asking for help with the house, and so I packed up my books, shipped them to Udon Thani, and followed this woman into the humid cradle of her childhood, thinking I was being noble, romantic, brave even. Dao picked us up from the airport. She drove a second-hand Toyota pickup and barely looked at me when we met. She was taller than Nicha, older, with eyes that didn't flinch. Her handshake was firm, and she said very little on the drive. "She's not used to Farang," Nicha explained. "She stays home. Very quiet." Dao glanced at me in the rearview mirror but said nothing. She didn't have to. There was something in her silence I would only understand later. Something that said, "You don't belong here, and I already know how this ends." The house was modest, single-storey, tiled floors, open-air kitchen out back, 2 bedrooms, one fan that squeaked like it had unfinished business with the ceiling. I rented a place a few streets over, modern Western bathroom, decent Wi-Fi, but I spent most evenings at their family home. Nicha slipped easily back into her village rhythm, or at least it looked that way. She went out in the mornings, claiming she was helping an old friend run a guest house. Most nights she'd return around 9, tired, but not too tired for a drink or a story. I never pushed. I played the part of the understanding expat boyfriend. Respectful, supportive, never jealous. Meanwhile, it was Dao who saw me more. She was always there in the background, quiet, reserved, Not cold, but unbothered. She'd cook for everyone, including me, without fanfare. Grilled catfish, green papaya salad, steamed rice that smelled faintly of jasmine. She kept to herself, rarely smiled, but she watched. Not with suspicion, just awareness. I asked her once if she painted professionally. She had canvases leaned against the kitchen wall, scenes of buffaloes in fields, rainy skies, monks walking with umbrellas. She shrugged. It's just something to do when no one's arguing, she said. I didn't know what she meant. Not yet. Nicha began borrowing money, small amounts at first, 2,000 baht here, 3,500 there, always for something urgent. An old aunt's surgery, a motorbike repair, a friend who couldn't make rent. She was convincing. She knew how to cry without looking pitiful, how to make you feel like helping her was your own idea. I should have kept better track, but I didn't. Not out of stupidity, but out of pride. Because to admit she was using me meant admitting I'd been duped. And for a man who lectures on critical thinking, that's worse than heartbreak. Dao, meanwhile, never asked for a thing. She spoke to me in broken English, and I replied in broken Thai. There were moments, brief, flickering ones, where we'd sit at the kitchen table while Nicha was out, and she'd pass me a dish without a word, or ask if I missed my home, or make a comment about the weather and laugh softly when I struggled with my tones. She had a dry sense of humour, understated, witty in a way Nicha wasn't. I remember one evening, just before sunset, I asked her, "Are you always this quiet?" She replied, "Are you always this blind?" I laughed, but she didn't, and I felt something twist in my chest. Not attraction, not yet, just the beginning of doubt. I finally checked my bank app one night, sitting alone on the balcony with a cold Leo in one hand and a mosquito coil hissing beside my bare feet. 42,000 baht gone in less than a month. Not all at once, just shaved. Like a pencil being slowly whittled down. It wasn't enough to set off alarm bells, but it was enough to make my stomach lurch. I waited until the next morning to ask. Nicha was still in bed, scrolling through her phone with her usual glassy detachment. "Did you take money from my Thai account?" I asked. She didn't even look up. "I told you about that. For the thing. For the paperwork." "What paperwork?" "You never listen," she said. "I already explained." That was her move. Make me feel senile. Make me question whether I had agreed. Had she mentioned it? Was I too tired that night? Maybe I nodded and forgot. A week later, it happened again. This time, 8,000 baht. Gone. I brought it up again. This time she got angry, said she felt like I didn't trust her, that if I had a problem, maybe I should just go back to my country and marry a boring white woman who only talks about dogs and salad. I didn't even know what that meant. That night she didn't come home. No call, no text. Her phone rang once and then went to voicemail. I stayed up until 2 a.m, sitting in that damned balcony chair, feeling like the world's dumbest professor. Dao came by the next morning with some soup and said calmly, "She's with her old friends from Bangkok. They drink a lot. Maybe not good for you to wait." I asked how she knew. She said, "I've seen this movie before." I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. I just nodded and thanked her for the soup, even though I had no appetite. Nicha showed up around noon the next day, smelling like gin and hairspray. She tossed her purse on the table and said, "I was with Lek and Mook. You know them." I didn't. I asked, "Why didn't you call?" She rolled her eyes. "My phone died." "Relax. You always want everything like a schedule." That night she was all affection again, made a fuss over dinner, touched my shoulder, told me she missed me, I wanted to believe her. I really did. But while she cooked, I watched Dao silently painting on the back patio, and for the first time, I saw something in her that made my throat tighten. She wasn't just quiet, she was tired. Tired of covering for her sister. Tired of watching this dance play out. Tired of me. Dao's birthday came around the following month. I didn't even know at first. Nicha never mentioned it. I found out from their mother, who handed me a bundle of jasmine flowers and said, "For Dao, today." That night, the family gathered. Not a big party, just a few neighbours, some cousins, plastic chairs, beer towers sweating under the humidity. Dao wore a pale yellow dress, her hair tied up in a simple knot. No makeup, no fuss, just herself. She smiled more that evening than I'd seen in months. Not because of me, she barely looked my way, but because the others were fussing over her, bringing plates of food, teasing her gently. There was love there, respect. She didn't demand it. She earned it. Nicha showed up 2 hours late, already tipsy, in a tight red dress that clung to her like a threat. She shouted, "Happy birthday, Big CS!" across the yard, drawing eyes, and then staggered over with a cake she didn't bake and a hug Dao didn't want. Dao stood there like stone. I tried to intervene, lighten the mood, offer a drink, diffuse the scene. But Nicha wasn't interested in civility. She was there to make a point. She clung to me all night, loud and dramatic, bragging about things we never did, whispering in my ear things I didn't want to hear. "She's jealous of us, you know," she hissed, slurring slightly. "Always has been, always will be." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because in that moment, watching Dao quietly collecting empty plates while Nicha laughed too loudly at her own jokes, I realised something horrible. I didn't want Nicha to touch me anymore. Dao blew out the candles on her cake without making a wish. Nicha demanded a photo. Dao said no. And then, like a switch flipping, Nicha snapped, said something sharp in Thai. I didn't catch it all, but I caught the words for useless, always alone, and pretending to be a saint. Dao's face didn't change. She just handed the knife to a cousin and walked off into the house. I followed her. I don't know why. Maybe to apologise. Maybe to explain something I hadn't yet done. I found her sitting on the back steps, barefoot, staring into the dark. "I'm sorry," I said. She looked at me, eyes calm. "You don't have to be sorry for her. I'm sorry for everything." She nodded, then said something that still echoes inside me. "She breaks everything she can't control." We sat in silence. And then, God help me, I reached for her hand. And she didn't pull away. It didn't start with a kiss. It started with a choice, a small, quiet one, but a choice nonetheless. Nicha had left again that night. Some last-minute trip to Khon Kaen with friends from university. She told me with a passing wave, like a waitress mentioning the specials. No details, no goodbye, just perfume in the air and the dull thud of the door closing behind her. I sat alone in the kitchen of my rental, staring at my half-eaten plate of rice, and felt something crack. Not explode, just crack, like a fault line that had been forming slowly underfoot, finally shifting. And I knew with unnerving clarity that if I stayed in that chair 1 minute longer, I'd start to hate myself for how much I was willing to accept just to avoid being alone. I walked the 5 minutes to Dao's house. I didn't rehearse anything, didn't have some grand excuse prepared. When I arrived, she was out back, watering the plants with one hand, a small towel slung around her neck. She glanced at me briefly, then looked back to the soil. "She left again?" she asked. I nodded. She said Khon Kaen. Didn't say when she'd be back. Dao didn't reply right away. She turned off the tap, set the hose down, and stood there for a moment as the last drops trickled onto the dirt. Then she walked inside, left the door open behind her. I followed. The lights inside were dim, just a low bulb in the kitchen and the glow of a battery-powered lantern by the sofa. She moved around calmly, like she'd done this routine 100 times. Folded a dish towel, placed 2 glasses on the table, poured water, not a word, just motion, intention. She finally sat down across from me. I was still standing. I didn't know what to say because every sentence that came to mind sounded either weak or rehearsed. She broke the silence. "You don't have to lie to me," she said, her tone flat. "Not about her, not about why you're here." I sat down. For a while we just looked at each other. I could hear a distant motorbike pass by, the buzz of insects outside, the creak of her ceiling fan overhead. My hand was on the table. Hers wasn't far from it. I reached out slowly, not with confidence, just honesty. She didn't pull away. There wasn't some sudden lunge, no dramatic film score moment. It was more like gravity, something natural, unspoken, and impossible to resist once you surrendered to it. I leaned in. She leaned in. Our foreheads touched first, then, finally, her lips met mine. It was soft, gentle, but it didn't stay that way. There was hunger in it, not the kind born of lust, but the kind born of loneliness, of years spent holding back, of too many things unsaid. It wasn't messy or rushed, but it was intense, quietly intense. The kind that pulls you in with slow, deliberate weight until you forget where your skin ends and someone else's begins. She led me to her room. No words, just the sound of the fan, the rustle of sheets, the occasional sharp intake of breath like a confession left too long inside. Her body wasn't sculpted like Nicha's. She didn't move like a woman trying to impress. She moved like someone who knew exactly what she was giving and wasn't in a hurry to give it all away. There was no performance, no seduction, just warmth and silence, and a kind of understanding that didn't need translation. Afterward, we lay there, her hand resting lightly on my chest, our bodies still tangled beneath the thin cotton sheet. I traced the edge of her collarbone with my finger, slow and aimless. "You don't regret it?" I asked. She didn't open her eyes, just said, "Not yet." And neither did I. I left early in the morning before the sun was up, walked home with the sunrise behind me, the street still quiet, my shirt half buttoned and sticking to my back in the thick air. I expected guilt to hit me, expected shame to rise like steam off the pavement, but it never came. I didn't feel like I'd done something awful. I felt like I'd finally stopped lying to myself. Maybe that's worse. It was bound to unravel. These things always do. Looking back, I'm not even sure we were being careful. Maybe we both wanted it to come out. Maybe it was a slow-motion collision, and we were just passengers pretending we didn't see the wall coming. Nicha came back from Konkan 2 days later. She was unusually sweet, brought me snacks, rubbed my shoulders, called me CHATUCHAK the way she used to back in Bangkok. It wasn't affection. It was surveillance. She could smell something had shifted. I'd changed. And she felt it, not in what I said, but in what I no longer offered. The guilt I didn't project. The trap was simple. She said she had errands to run in the city, asked me to come with her to Lotus. I declined, said I was behind on grading some student essays I'd been reviewing remotely. She kissed my cheek and left. 30 minutes later, Dow called. "She's here," she said. Just that. No panic in her voice, just an exhausted calm. I was across town in under 10 minutes, speeding down side roads with my heart thudding like a mallet on sheet metal. But I was too late. Nicha had already barged into Dao's home and found what she was looking for, or more accurately, what she wanted to find. I don't know what she saw exactly. Maybe my shirt from the night before, maybe the still warm teacups on the table, maybe just Dao's silence when she asked where I was. But she didn't need proof. She'd come for confrontation. I stood outside the house, listening to the shouting, sharp, rapid-fire Thai that cut through the air like glass. My name came up more than once. I caught phrases like Kun Chua and Lang Chang, cheater, backstabber. Then a sound I wasn't ready for, glass shattering. I rushed inside. Dao stood in the middle of the kitchen, still as stone. A ceramic bowl lay in pieces at her feet. Nicha was pacing, mascara smudged, hands clenched, eyes wild with betrayal, but not heartbreak. No tears, just rage. The kind of rage you see when someone loses control of their story. You think she loves you? She snapped, jabbing a finger at me. You think she's better than me? She's not. She just knows how to act quiet. She's fake, always has been. I tried to calm her down, to explain, though I didn't even know what I was trying to justify. She wasn't having it. You gave me promises, she hissed. You gave her everything else. Dao didn't speak, didn't defend herself. She just began cleaning up the broken bowl with bare hands, ignoring the blood from a small cut on her thumb. Nicha turned to her again. You waited. All these years you waited for me to screw up, and now you take him? Dao stood up, met her gaze, and said simply, You gave him away. I just stopped pretending. The silence that followed was suffocating. Nicha stared at her sister for a long time, breathing heavy. Then she looked at me like I was something she'd stepped in. You deserve each other, she spat and stormed out. The screen door slammed behind her. I never saw her again. After Nicha left, it was quiet. Not peaceful, just empty. Dao didn't cry. She didn't scream or break down in my arms like a woman in a movie. She just kept sweeping up the shattered ceramic, rinsed her hands under the tap, and went about her day like it was any other Thursday. I offered to help. She said no. That night I stayed at my rental. I didn't even try to go to her house. It felt wrong somehow, like I had dirt on my shoes I needed to wash off first. I spent hours lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan, playing out every possible version of how this could have gone differently. But there wasn't one. The moment I stepped through her door that first night, this ending was already locked in. The fallout came quickly. Nicha made a few calls. Their mother found out. So did their cousins. I became the foreigner who broke the family, the latest in a long line of cautionary tales told at backyard tables under string lights and beer towers. Dao bore the brunt of it. Her relatives didn't say much to me, but she told me the whispers had started, that some of them said she'd planned this from the beginning, that she seduced me out of jealousy, that she was no better than Nicha, just quieter about it. She took it with the same quiet strength I was beginning to understand was her armour. People need a villain, she said once. If it's not Nicha, it's me. They won't blame you. You're just the man. And she was right. Nobody asked me anything. Nobody told me I'd ruined anything. I was just the Farang who'd been misled, confused, manipulated. She was the Thai woman who should have known better. That hurt more than I expected it to. I told Dao I'd leave, not because I didn't want to be with her, but because I didn't want to be the reason she lost her place in her own family. I even booked a flight, told myself I'd go back to Oregon, clean up what was left of my reputation, finish my last few years at the university, and disappear into a quiet, forgettable retirement. Dao didn't argue, but on the day before my flight, she came to my rental and handed me a small canvas. It was a painting, her own of course, of a lone water buffalo standing in a green field under storm clouds. The posture of the animal was unmistakable, head lowered but not defeated. She said, "If you run now, you'll do it forever." I cancelled the flight. We didn't talk about marriage. We didn't even talk about love. We just started living. One day at a time. It's been 6 years now. I live with Dao in a modest home just outside Udon Thani. We built it ourselves. Well, she built it. I just paid for it and occasionally held a hammer when asked. There's a small garden out front with lemongrass and chili plants, and an open kitchen in the back where she makes things that still surprise me. Her food isn't fancy, but it's precise, balanced, like her. We don't talk about Nicha. Occasionally we hear things. A cousin mentioned she moved to Pattaya. Someone else said she's working at a spa. Dao never asks for more, and I never offer. The subject hangs between us like a door we both agreed to nail shut. I teach English part-time at a local high school. It's not prestigious work, and the kids laugh at my accent, but it keeps my mind sharp and my ego humble. Most of the time I sit on the veranda drinking instant coffee, reading novels I used to assign to students who never read them. I've stopped quoting Nietzsche to anyone who'll listen. These days I find more wisdom in watching the neighbour's cat chase lizards. Dao still paints, water buffaloes mostly, sometimes monks. Her palette has changed, less grey, more green. I once asked her why she paints the same subjects again and again. She said, because they don't pretend. There are days when the past creeps in, usually when it rains. The sound of it on the roof brings back the night Nicha found out. I remember her voice, the venom in it, the disbelief. Not because she lost me, but because she lost control. Sometimes I wonder if she ever really loved me. More often, I wonder if I did. That's a hard thing to admit, even now. But the truth is, I think I loved the idea of her. The spark, the danger, the way she made me feel less old, less academic, less beige. But love? No. Dao never tried to dazzle me. She never asked for anything, never begged, never schemed. She just gave what she had and let me decide if I could handle that kind of honesty. I couldn't at first. Now I try. Every day I try. There are still cracks, little moments where doubt creeps in. Did we do the right thing? Was there a better way? But they fade, like the scars on Dao's fingers from chopping chilies too fast. Still there, but barely noticeable. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Redemption isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in quiet mornings, in shared tea, in the absence of lies, and sometimes in a woman who paints water buffaloes and says nothing when you break. I used to think regret was something you either carried like a badge or buried like a body, but I've come to realise it's more like fog. It doesn't scream. It just rolls in quietly, soft around the edges, and sits with you for a while, especially in the early mornings when the kettle's whistling and the sun hasn't quite broken through. I don't regret choosing Dao. I regret that I hurt her in the process of finding her, and I regret that I let myself become the kind of man who could lie to one sister while falling asleep next to the other. That's not poetic. That's not a clever twist in a novel. That's just a selfish man trying to rewrite his own guilt as fate. I've spent my life teaching ideas, ethics, logic, morality. Hundreds of lectures about utilitarianism and virtue theory and the trolley problem. But none of those frameworks prepared me for what it feels like to be the cause of someone else's breaking point. Because the truth is, I didn't just cheat on Nicha. I betrayed a family bond I never had the right to interfere with. I turned one sister against the other. And even if Nicha had been reckless, manipulative, cruel, I still had a choice, and I chose wrong. until somehow I chose right. That's the part I still struggle to reconcile. Dow and I built something real from the ruins of something rotten, and it's lasted, not because we're perfect, but because we've both already seen what happens when love turns into leverage. We have no illusions left. She tells me sometimes when I'm overthinking again, you always want everything to make sense. Some things don't. You have to be okay with that. She's right, not everything adds up. Sometimes the story doesn't have a clean moral. Sometimes people aren't symbols. They're just messy and tired and human. So take what you want from this story. Shake your head at me. Call me a fool or a coward or worse. Just know I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just telling the truth, finally, and hoping it helps someone else avoid the same damn trap. And that's Alan's story. It's raw, it's complicated, and whether you see him as a villain or a man who finally found peace, one thing's clear, he's not hiding from what happened. Sometimes these stories don't come with clean lessons or tidy endings. They come with scars and choices, and the quiet hope that we might still be able to build something honest out of the damage we've done. If you made it this far, let us know what you think in the comments. Was Alan just another foreigner who played with fire? Or was he a man who got burned, then learned? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you never miss a new story. This is Inside Thailand, where the stories are messy, human and all too real. See you in the next one.